In this movie, I'll show you how to erase and smooth lumps in your artwork. And specifically, I'm talking about this extra bit of a line up here in the hair. We've got a lump down here at the bottom of the chin. We have some imperfections around this eye. So if you're working along with me, obviously your imperfections are going to be different. But I do want to show you how you can make things better using a combination of the eraser, the blob brush, and the smooth tool. So I'm going to start up here at the top of the artwork, and then I'll click on this black outline with the black arrow tool to select it. And then I'll get the eraser tool, which I can now get by pressing the E key. And with this small brush, I'll just go ahead and paint over the top right here, like so, and then I'll paint away all that extra lump. And notice that doesn't necessarily give me the smoothest results. And the thing is, the eraser tool isn't quite as skilled at creating smooth transitions as the blob brush is. And part of the reason is if you press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac, in order to bring up the eraser tool options, you can see that we don't have a fidelity slider, which is a shame, quite frankly, but it's just the way it is, so I'm going to cancel out of here. So you may find yourself needing to smooth things over using the Smooth tool, which you can get by clicking and holding on the Pencil tool, and then selecting the Smooth tool from the flyout menu, and then just drag over that same area once again in order to smooth it out. Then you may want to zoom out a little bit just to make sure that you haven't messed up any other parts of the path, because what can happen is when you're smoothing one section, another section gets unsmooth. So you may have to just sort of check out what's going on in other sections of that path outline. Now, this area may respond to the Smooth tool by itself, but in my case, it didn't. So I'll just go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac, and I'll switch again to my eraser tool, and I'll paint over this little region right there. Hope for the best. It ends up looking okay, but we do have a couple of neighboring anchor points right there. In fact, we have two sets of anchor points on either side of this segment, which is generally not something you want. So I'll go ahead and select the Smooth tool once again, which has no keyboard shortcut, not by default anyway. You can give it one if you like. But I'm just going to drag over this section in order to smooth things out. All right, now let's check out any other problems. We've got a problem right there, as you can see. So I'll go ahead and once again select the path outline, and I'm doing that by pressing the Control key or the Command key on the Mac to get my black arrow tool, and then clicking on that path like so. So every time you use the Smooth tool, you deselect the path outline. All right, now I'll grab my eraser tool and I'll drag over this little section, and that gives me another divot. So I'll grab my Smooth tool and I'll just drag over this region once again to smooth it out. Now this eye has a different problem, as you can see. I'm missing some path outline, so I'll Control click or Command click on that path to select it. And I'm going to make these anchor points a little more visible by double clicking on an empty section of my drawing layer to bring up the Layer Options dialog box. And then I'll change the color to violet, which shows up pretty well. And I'll click OK. Now I need to add some stuff to these path outlines, so I'll go ahead and switch back to my blob brush. And I've got a little brush, as you can see right here. So I'll just paint over this area with it. And then I'll paint over this region as well. And if I get unsmooth results or too many anchor points, then I'll just go ahead and switch back to the Smooth tool and drag over each one of these sections like so. And that looks like I need to drag a couple of times in order to make that work. All right, we have a little bump up here at the top of the hair. So I'll go ahead and Control click or Command click on that path to select it. I'll get my eraser tool and then I'll paint over this region like so. And of course, I'm only erasing the selected path outline, nothing more. And then I'll switch back to my Smooth tool and I'll drag over that portion of the path to smooth it out. And now I'll go ahead and zoom out a little bit, and I'm just searching for other problems right there. It looks like we have a little bit of a problem edge. And so this time I need to add to it. So I'll grab my blob brush tool again, and I'll just paint upward like so. And I'm trying to be careful here, so I do as good of a job as I can. And let's see, where else do we have problems? I think there's, right there on the bottom of the chin. I'll go ahead and get rid of it by painting with the eraser tool. And I'm just going to paint straight with the tool and see if I get a nice sharp corner, which I do. And that seems pretty good to me. And then we've got some other problems down here on this part of the path. So I'll just go and paint over this with the blob brush tool this time. That gives me a very unsmooth result. So I'll drag over it with the Smooth tool. But you don't want to drag all the way to the corner because that will smooth out the corner, which is not what you want. And here I can smooth that out using the blob brush tool once again. So I'll just go ahead and paint down like so. And that's a little unsmooth, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. And then we've got a lump on the shoulder, as I recall. There it is. And so I'll now grab my eraser tool and I'll paint over it. And then I will revisit it with the smooth tool just by dragging. And just so you know, by the way, I've got my smooth tool set to smooth things up as much as possible, which you do by pressing the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to bring up the Smooth Tool Options dialog box. And as you can see here, I've cranked the slider setting all the way over to smooth, which is just fine, so I'll just cancel out. All right, and then I will zoom out by pressing Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac, and I'll deselect my artwork by pressing Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac. And the result is the artwork you see right here. I think things could be a little better, though, on this lip. So I'm going to Control-click or Command-click right there. And this time I'm going to grab my blob brush tool, and I'm going to increase the size of my brush like so. And instead of dragging with the tool, I'm just going to click in order to create a little bit of roundness right there. All right, now I think I'm done. So I'll zoom out once again, press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac. And that's how you both erase and smooth away lumps in your artwork using a combination of the eraser tool, the blob brush, and the smooth tool here inside Illustrator.